Bullseye with Jesse Thorn is a production of MaximumFun.org and is distributed by NPR.
I'm Jesse Thorn. It's Bullseye. John Bradley was about 22 years old when he got the part that changed his life. He just graduated from theater school in Manchester, England. He'd done a little bit of theater work, but never anything on camera. He got called in for an audition, literally his first ever. He knew it was a big deal. A new show being produced by HBO called Game of Thrones. And then he got the part. And by the way, we are going to talk about Game of Thrones, which is a show that is over. But if you haven't seen it, we might spoil some of the show for you. Nothing really huge, but, spoiler alert for time travelers. Anyway, for 8 years, John played Samwell Tarly, Jon Snow's close friend. They meet when they both join the Night's Watch, and the journey Samwell takes on the show is a unique one. In the beginning, it's clear that Sam isn't cut out for the Night's Watch. He isn't a natural warrior. He is heavyset and soft and awkward with a weapon. He's smart, but he doesn't have a keen sense of realpolitik or the manipulation of the levers of power. He's nice and a little goofy. I mean, basically, he's the show's nerd. And on any other show, you can pretty much guess his character's trajectory. He stays a bumbling comic sidekick, or maybe at some point he gets killed off tragically. Or maybe, somehow, he finds the warrior inside him and he learns to fight like the Hound or whatever. But on Game of Thrones, none of that happens. The things Sam was bullied for, his kindness and his empathy and his bookishness, turn out to be assets, not liabilities. He becomes a maester, a scholar, and he plays a vital part in the battle against the dead. And by the show's last episode, when all the great houses meet to figure out the future of Westeros, Sam finally has the respect of his peers. Or something close to the respect of his peers.
We represent all the great houses, but whomever we choose, they won't just rule over lords and ladies. Maybe the decision about what's best for everyone should be left to, well, everyone.
Maybe we should give the dogs a vote as well.
I'll ask my horse.
John Bradley, welcome to Bullseye. It's really nice to have you on the show.
It's great to be here. Thanks so much.
What an extraordinary achievement to be a part of, and congratulations on bringing it home.
Thank you. Yeah, it feels very strange to be one of the kind of very few people who've been in every single season of this show. There's only a handful of us left, and to have been in every single one of the 8 seasons, it's a rare and very great privilege.
Your ticket is punched for life now, John. I have a friend whose father-in-law was on Star Trek.
Oh, yeah.
And the original Star Trek. And so since 1965 or 1968 or whenever it was that Star Trek ran, he and the other main cast members of Star Trek have just had their lives conjoined. It's like those, your 6 best high school girlfriends that you... every 5 years when somebody turns 30, you all go on a vacation together.
Well, the fact that you thought I had 6 girlfriends in high school means that you don't really know me that well at all. Over the course of this interview, you're going to know just what an erroneous assumption that is on your part.
Well,
I
may be describing a hypothetical group of young ladies. I think it would be pretty weird, even if you did have 6 girlfriends in high school, if you went on vacation with them.
I'd be lucky to
years.
even get 6 hypothetical girlfriends in high school, believe me.
But there is something remarkable about having been through this crazy crucible of, flying to Iceland and Croatia and flying to Los Angeles to do with people that, your professional life and probably personal life will be tied to forever. And here you are, you're like 30-ish and you were in college when this started.
Yeah, and I think that's why it makes it such a unique experience for people like me and people like Kit and Emilia and Maisie and Sophie and Isaac, because we don't know what it's really like to be professional actors and not be in this show. I think that's one of the reasons why it coming to an end is such a weird experience for us, because if you take people like Charles Dance or Dame Diana Rigg or people like that, they had these amazing careers before Game of Thrones, and then they were in Game of Thrones, and then they'll have an amazing career after it. But with us, it's all we know, and coming out the other side of it, it just feels like such a kind of stark, if you'll pardon the pun, such a kind of stark difference between being in it for all those years and then suddenly being not in it. The last time I wasn't in Game of Thrones, as you say, I was in college, and it was my entire 20s, which is a formative period in anybody's life. But to have your 20s associated with this amazing experience and these amazing people and the friends that you've made that will be your friends for life, but to suddenly be without it, it feels like a real separation's happened, and it almost feels like you're kind of starting again. It feels like you slipped into some kind of wormhole of the show, and now you've come out of it, and you have to get used to what life is like without it again, and that's going to be really weird.
Has it already been weird?
Do you know what? It's been weird, and it's been weird in ways that come as a complete surprise. Now, for example, just before we started this, when I was on my way to the studio to record this, I had a look at your Twitter feed, and it said, if you've got any questions for John, who played Samwell Tarly on Game of Thrones, and moments like that where you think, oh my God, I played him. It's already in the past tense. That's one of the weird things. For kind of 8 years, I've been the man who plays Samwell Tarly, and then since Sunday, the tense has completely changed, and I'm suddenly the man who played him, and it's in the past, and you can only look back on it as something that's in the past tense and isn't of this moment. It's consigned to history now, and you can think about it in big all-consuming, big kind of cosmic ways, if you like, when you talk about how time is passing and over the course of a lifetime and transitions that happen in your life. But sometimes it's little tiny things like that and little tiny quirks of language that you're really just not used to that can really bring it on home. And yeah, I think that we're going to be having to get used to that for a while. But it's only kind of 3 or 4 days since it's been over. It's been over for us as a kind of everyday experience for over a year now. I wrapped in almost to the day in a year ago in 2018, the middle of May. That was just one stage in a very, very long goodbye. And I've been trying to defer feeling the emotion of this goodbye because I thought, well, I've wrapped on it, but we've not been on the air yet. So I don't really have to think about it being over until we've been on the air. And then even up to last week when I was thinking, well, okay, we've shown 5 episodes of the final season, but I'm not going to think about it being over just yet because we still have 1 episode to go. It's only when that episode's been on that I really have to confront the idea that this thing is finished. And that was Sunday night / Monday. And it's just been a very, very weird few days. But you just hope that in your career and in your life, you just do things that bring you the same level of fulfillment, and you forge, the same kind of intense friendships, and you become part of other kind of family units that match it in terms of the affection that you have for each other and the professional respect you have for each other. But that's all in the future. I don't really have any of that yet. All I'm left with now is memories of a really wonderful and special time. And of course, the friendships that I made with Kit Harington and Hannah Murray and Emilia Clarke and all of these people that have become such an important part of a very formative time of my life, I'm going to have them going forward. But the reason for us all to be friends and the structure that brought us all together, that's kind of gone. And that's going to take a bit of adjusting to. But I think that the people were always what I was going to miss the most. And as long as you miss the people, you're kind of happy because you're in charge of how big a part they play in your life going forward. But yeah, the show, that's a piece of not only our history, but a piece of kind of entertainment history, and it's only ever going to be looked back on from now on, which is very odd.
As I was watching the show's finale and knowing that I was going to be interviewing you in a few days, I imagined you like 20 minutes after the show ended, texting maybe Jim Broadbent a text that says, like, what is being an actor?
Yeah, completely. That's almost how you feel. You want some kind of guidance from somebody that it's actually going to be okay. And I ended up watching the final episode in a screening room in London with Emilia Clarke and some of her friends and Jacob Anderson, who plays Grey Worm. I hadn't planned on watching it with anybody. I planned on watching it with my girlfriend, but in terms of getting together with people from the show, I didn't think that was going to happen, and that was organised at the very last minute. And I think it was a really good way to do it in the end, not just because we were watching it on a big screen and with other people, which I think is an unbeatable way to watch a piece of entertainment, but also because there were people there who know how I'm feeling, especially Emilia, because Emilia's been on it ever since season 1, the same way I have, and she's probably going through a lot of those feelings that I'm feeling about saying goodbye to it. So just to have her there, we didn't talk about it, we didn't dissect it afterwards and have a heart-to-heart about it. We just kind of knew implicitly that we were both feeling the same way, and that was a great kind of support network to have at that moment in time, because nobody really understands the same unless they've had something like that, unless they've had a very intensive working relationship with people like that. Even though myself and Emilia only worked together technically in the final season, somebody who's gone on that journey with you and knows what it's like to experience that kind of thing, to have them nearby at that very pivotal moment in your life, that was a perfect way of doing it, I think. But Jim, it turns out that Jim, of course, Jim Broadbent was only in it for one season, but it turns out he wrote the whole thing. He was responsible for writing that whole book. So people think,
within the context of the fictional narrative.
Oh yeah, within the context of the logic of the show, Jim wrote the whole thing, and that's such an interesting point. People can say all they want. Oh, Jim Broadbent played a small part in season 7 of Game of Thrones, but you think no, he didn't. Jim's actually probably the most important character in it, and it's no less than he deserves.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be like, hey, who wrote this? How about the guy from Topsy Turvy? That guy's great.
How about the guy from Topsy Turvy?
That guy's a genius.
Yeah, if there's anybody you trust to write this whole thing, it's Jim Broadbent. Even if I did come up with the title, or Sam came up with the title.
Do you remember what the character breakdown was when you went to the audition to play Sam?
I remember which scene it was. The scene I had to audition with was the scene all the way back in season 1, in Sam's first episode, where Sam has to explain to John what he's doing at Castle Black, and you get some kind of insight into Sam's childhood and how damaged he is and what an abusive upbringing he had at the hands of his father. And the character breakdown just said Sam is overweight, shy, highly intelligent and nervous. And so that breakdown is kind of as sparse as it is, that character breakdown and those adjectives with this speech, and you suddenly start to be able to make connections between the two. You start to think, oh, he's nervous, but that's only because he's had this abusive upbringing, and he's highly intelligent, and maybe that was part of it as well, and he's overweight, and maybe that's a symptom and a byproduct of this abusive childhood as well. And when you just have these two pieces of paper, separate pieces of paper really, and hold them side by side, you start to be able to intermingle this information and start to work out a lot of his motives and a lot of his DNA and a lot of his character makeup and a lot of the reasons for him being as he is. And that's the thing about great writing, I think. Great writing, as that monologue was all the way back in season 1, you don't need an awful lot of information to be able to figure a character out as an actor. It's almost like a kind of musical score, even though I don't read music. All the clues are there if you think about it properly, and if you commit enough mental energy to it, you should be able to figure out all of these notes and figure out how to play it and figure out the clues for what's hiding behind these words and what's hiding behind these motivations that this character is displaying. So yeah, that was it. Yeah, overweight, highly intelligent, shy and nervous, combined with that speech, It's just all you need to know about Samwell Tarly. Especially all you need to know about Samwell Tarly when we first meet him. The journey that he goes on, maybe some of those scars definitely heal, and he does develop, and he does, draw a veil over some of those quite apparent character traits that he exhibits early on. But when you first meet him, that speech and that description is kind of all you need to know about where he is psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually at that point.
You talked a little bit on the Conan show about a speech that Conan saw you give at one of it was either a rap party or a premiere party for one of the seasons of the show. One of the things that you talked about was the remarkable feeling that you had that, having spent your whole life as an overweight kid and an overweight adolescent and young adult into your early 20s, that's a burden that you have to deal with socially. And to have that be the thing that someone wanted from you.
Yeah, exactly.
And how remarkable of a circumstantial change in your life that was.
Yeah, it's just that feeling that you can't quite escape if you're a kind of overweight child or an overweight young person, that this is going to really hold me back, actually. And this is going to be something that's going to be an obstacle, and people aren't going to be interested in me because of it, especially if you want to be an actor, because, the roles that are kind of available for an overweight young person, they're so few and far between, especially the good roles, that you just think, well, I've got no chance. And to find that while I was thinking all that about myself, and while I did used to lie awake in bed sometimes thinking, God, I just wish that things were different and I wish I could wake up and just not have this weight to deal with. All the time I was thinking that, David and Dan and the producers of the show were in Los Angeles, and they were looking for exactly me. They were looking for a person who was not only overweight, but also was, carrying a lot of emotional baggage around as a result of that weight, and had low self-esteem issues because of it, and found it hard to engage with the world because of it, and all these ingredients that were such a part of my makeup at the time and such a part of Sam's makeup, they kind of fed into each other at a really kind of magical moment, and if I'd have known that they were looking for me while I was thinking those things about myself, or if somebody would have told me that they were looking for me, I never would have believed it, because I just thought, oh, life doesn't really work like that. But they were looking for exactly me, and I was available, and I was ready and willing to use all of those things about myself to do a good job for them. And it's not only that they would put up with what I deemed to be shortcomings, and they would accept them and they would work around them. They saw them as virtues. They saw them as qualities that they were looking for, and I wouldn't have been in the running for this wonderful part with so much potential to it and so much life to it if I wasn't going through these things in my personal life. And I've said that at Conan, and you shouldn't kind of read YouTube comments if you can possibly help it, and you shouldn't read Twitter comments, but sometimes it's hard to resist that, really. And you see people who say, oh, well, if you were that upset about it, just have a salad and go for a run, and you don't have to be like that. You had the power to change it if you were that unhappy about it. But that's probably a lot of thin people talking, and a lot of the time it's not just about greed, and it's not just about not wanting to go for a run or preferring cake to salad. It's not just about that. You can't necessarily make these perfectly rational, informed decisions about that, because overeating and the emotional crutch that comes with overeating is just a symptom of some kind of deep, not necessarily conscious unhappiness, because I thought I thought at the time, and I still do think that I was quite a happy person day to day, and I had a lovely family and I had great friends around me, but there's something inside you that you consider to be empty, and you consider to be a blank that needs to be filled in, and you struggle for a way of filling that and giving yourself little moments of happiness along the way and little tiny things just to distract you from that feeling, and little tiny nice moments in your day that can make you feel better. And food is one way of doing that. And other people do it with drink. I didn't drink. I still don't really, and I'd never done drugs either. So people find different ways of filling these things, and mine was food. And I wasn't necessarily enjoying myself, and I wasn't necessarily enjoying that lifestyle. But when it symbolises something, and you use it as a way of treating something about yourself that you're not happy with, it's not just as simple as why don't you wake up tomorrow and have a salad and go for a run. It's just something that's more ingrained in you like that, and it just takes a while to kind of break that habit. But yeah, all of this at the time was stuff that Sam was probably going through as a nervous, overweight child, and I was going through as well. And sometimes the stars are just aligned your way, and sometimes you just get the breaks, and that was the big break, and that was the moment that I thought somebody must have been looking down on me and smiling.
More with John Bradley when we come back from a quick break. In just a bit, Bullseye fans on Twitter have questions for him too. They're nice ones. A little weird, but nice. It's Bullseye from MaximumFun.org and NPR. Support for this podcast and the following message come from Sierra Nevada Brewing Company. In 1980, with a few $1,000s in used dairy equipment, Ken Grossman founded Sierra Nevada Brewing Company. Ken's award-winning ales propelled him from home brewer to craft brewer. Today, Ken and his family still own 100% of the company, one of the most successful independent craft breweries in America. More at sierranevada.com.
There are so many different labels on food these days. Organic, non-GMO, fair trade, cage-free, hand-gathered. It's overwhelming.
I sometimes jokingly refer to it as the NASCARing of our food.
Life Kit has a new episode, Making Sense of Food Labels. Find it and more by searching Life Kit All Guides in Apple Podcasts.
I can't hear myself, but I'm assuming that...
These are real podcast listeners, not actors.
Hey, thanks for coming. Here's a list of descriptors. What would you choose to describe the perfect podcast?
I mean, vulgarity.
Dumb. Definitely dumb.
And right here, this one, meritless.
What if I told you there was a podcast that did have all of that?
No.
Jordan Jesse Go. And it's free.
Jordan Jesse Go?
Jordan Jesse Go.
Jordan Jesse Go, a real podcast. Welcome back to Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. My guest John Bradley played Samwell Tarly on Game of Thrones, which just wrapped up its 8th and final season last month. Samwell was, of course, Jon Snow's close friend and advisor, and the first guy on the show to kill a White Walker. Let's get back into our interview. Your character was the nerd hero of what might be the greatest nerd television program of all time. With all apologies to the Whovians in the audience and the Trekkers and so forth. But I like it the best of all.
Oh, great. Nice to know.
And I wonder what, as a kid and as an adolescent, you were unduly passionate about. Intemperately passionate about.
There are two things in my life that I think are ever present, really, and other things kind of come and go. But there are some things in my life that I know my passion will never really dim for, and one of those things is comedy. Comedy is my first passion, really, and my first love, and the thing that I turn to so often for comfort and escapism. And looking back, I think that I was watching comedy when I was a very, very young person that I shouldn't really have been watching. I remember being, I think, 5, 6, 7 years old and watching, do you know Blackadder?
Sure.
Yeah, I remember watching Blackadder when I was 5 or 6 years old, and that's an an adult, grown-up comedy program, historically set, but with lots of kind of bawdy humour about it and some sexual humour and a lot of cursing in it and bad language that I shouldn't have really been watching when I was 5 or 6 years old. But I remember just loving it so much and just loving the way it made me feel. And I think one of the first awakenings I had about being an actor or being a performer is I used to watch Blackadder and I used to watch Monty Python and Fawlty Towers and some American shows as well. I used to love Married with Children. We used to have Married with Children on all the time, which really dates this to the kind of mid-90s. And I used to watch it and think, I'd love to be able to make other people feel the way they're making me feel. And the other one is football, soccer. Soccer is something that I go to and experience live and watch on television a lot. And I say that I support Manchester United, and people then say, "Oh, who's your favourite player from the 1939-40 season?" or "Can you name the top scorer in this season?" And I don't really think about it like that. I don't engage with football, and I don't engage with sport on a intellectual kind of academic basis. It's not an academic subject. I connect with it purely emotionally.
I don't know a lot about Premier League soccer or, frankly, soccer or football in general.
Yeah.
Are Manchester United, I know they're one of the greatest and most famous teams of the Premier League. Are they good guys or bad guys? Like if you were a Yankees fan,
yeah,
I could ask you, are the Yankees good guys or bad guys? And if you were honest with me, you would know that the Yankees are bad guys.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, in that case, Manchester United are definitely bad guys. They're really despised quite aggressively in England or in the UK or, even in the football community worldwide, because they had such a period of success in the 1990s where they were just winning everything in sight. And we had Sir Alex Ferguson, who's the greatest manager that football's ever seen. And we were just overcoming every single challenge. We were making history. We were winning everything that we really could win at that time. And that's not going to make people like you, I'm afraid. That's just really not going to do anything for your kind of public affection being shown towards you. But just lately, we've had a little bit of a downturn and things aren't going our way, and there are other teams who are rising up ahead of us, and we're not winning things every season now. But that doesn't necessarily seem to be assuaging or changing people's perception of us. People seem to be taking a real delight in our downfall at the moment, and that's easy to take when you're winning everything in sight, because you can console yourself with trophies and console yourself with success. But when you're not having the success that you once had, and people are still vitriolic towards you on a daily basis, and the media seem to take great delight in documenting your downfall and holding you up as some kind of morality tale about, this too shall pass, and you shouldn't get too smug because, comparatively bad times are on the way. You think, God, this, and without any trophies, this really is the worst of both worlds. So yeah, no, definitely bad guys. I mean, we have a devil on our badge, and our nickname is the Red Devils. So I probably didn't need that long an answer to answer that question, to be fair. I could have just said, no, we're the Red Devils. We're definitely bad guys, and that's all there is to it. But I like them. I like us. Who's to say who's a good guy and who's a bad guy? There's anti-heroes in everything. Bring us back to Game of Thrones.
I imagined you like doing a thing where you like snap both fingers, clap your hands together, and then do an expansive gesture when you said that brings us back to Game of Thrones. Like gave it a big magician's finish.
No. I just that wasn't the plan at all. That link. I just stumbled across that. I'm very, very pleased with it. But no. To say that I constructed that answer with that in mind would just be giving myself far too much credit.
I know that you watch the show because you've described watching the show.
Yeah.
And I think it's a pretty good show to watch when it comes to shows that you're on, because even the biggest stars of the show are on screen 15% of the time.
True, yeah.
when the song is playing, do you ever make up words to the song inside your head, or sing along to the song?
No, it's such a weird kind of Pavlovian reaction that I have to that theme now, because I can't listen to that music without associating it with a certain kind of nerves that I'm going to be in this show and I'm going to be judged on my performance in this show. And at some point, I'm going to pop up in this show and do acting in it. And the world's going to see me doing acting in this show. And that always starts with the music. Like I think I just associate the music now with being in screening rooms. Like we did our premiere in New York this year. We've done them in LA in the past. And you sit in big auditoriums and auditoria with thousands of people or hundreds of people who are going to watch this episode. And when the music starts, the entire audience erupts into some kind of frenzy of excitement. And every time they do that, and every time they scream and shout and they applaud when they hear the start of that music, a certain dread kicks in for me that I think, oh God, I wish I was just a fan of this show. Like, I wish I could just watch it with everybody else and cheer when it comes on and not have this sense of responsibility or this worry that I'm going to be judged literally any minute now. So I think people in it have a much different reaction to that music. It fills, the vast majority of the world is filled with excitement when they hear that music. But I think for us, there's just a sense of, oh God, here we go. Here we go. Oh no, what if it goes wrong? What if this is the episode that I'm just terrible in? And what if this is the episode that the world never quite forgives me for? We can always see that with, slightly more loaded and slightly more negatively, I guess, if you're involved in it and you're going to be held up to the judgment of, let's face it, a really quite judgmental fan base over the course of the next hour.
I go, Thrones, Thrones, Game of Thrones, Thrones, Throny Thrones. Inside my head, and occasionally, like, with my dog doing a little dance.
Oh, that's nice. I'm going to think about... Well, I nearly said, this is why I'm so not in the mindset of it finishing yet. I said to myself, I'll think of that next time it's on. You know what? There's not going to be a next time it's going to be on. I wish we'd have done this interview 8 years ago. Then every time I was nervous about it, I could think of you dancing with your dog. But now that little tool is never going to come in handy. Cheers for that.
You, I imagine, get a script, by email or courier or whatever once every week or two during the time when things are filming, and also the story of Game of Thrones was prescribed largely by the books for at least the first 5 or 6 years of the show.
Yeah.
But I wonder, once that was no longer the case, whether you imagined what the path and what the end point would be for Sam, for your guy.
Well, I think I was kind of on a similar way of thinking to a lot of the viewers, in so much as you after a while, if you've been exposed to enough film and TV, you start to know the form and structure of it, and you start to recognise some of the kind of flags that you see sometimes, which can give you clues as to how things are going to end. For example, if you get somebody who is softer than most and is likable and isn't tough and kind of is kind of some sort of emotional centerpiece to the series and has a good heart, you can be forgiven for thinking, if you've watched enough film and TV in your lifetime, that he's clearly going to die for emotional manipulation, because you've seen it in so many films. You've seen the good guy die, halfway through a film, and then that gives the hero the impetus that he needs to carry on, and he kind of fights for the memory of the good guy that's died. You've seen that so many times. You've seen that, you kind of get used to that cliche over time. So a lot of people could be forgiven for thinking, like I kind of was, at some point in the last 2 seasons, Sam's going to die, Jon Snow's going to see that, and then that's just going to kind of empower and galvanise Jon Snow to go forward and exact his revenge for the death of Sam or something. And I think that to give Sam a happy ending and to make Sam be one of the very few people that actually survives over the course of these entire 8 seasons, sometimes completely against all odds, and sometimes coming back from situations that you just can't imagine him ever surviving. If you take the Battle of Winterfell, where he's just been besieged by White Walkers and he sometimes has to try and fight them off, that isn't a situation that you'd expect Samwell Tarly to survive. And I think in shows that are kind of much more prescribed and much less bold and much less brave and relying more heavily on cliche, Sam would have died in those moments. But the fact that he's defied the odds, and David and Dan and the writers that we have, they've defied audience expectations by keeping him alive, and keeping him alive, not just keeping him alive to the very end, but giving him a happy ending where suddenly his opinion and his unique set of skills and the attributes that he brings to the table, suddenly they're valued and they're prized, and he sits around that table with Tyrion and everybody else at the end because he's got something to offer. And it's not that he's subscribed suddenly to some kind of toxic masculinity precedent. It's not that he's suddenly stopped being nerdy and bookish and he's learned how to swing a sword around and he's become a great fighter. That would be a redemption story in, I think, a much kind of cheaper narrative landscape, really, that he suddenly becomes a great fighter. He finds that warrior within himself and he fulfills a lot of those patriarchal stereotypes that nobody thought he was capable of. That would have been one way to look at it. But what you get with Sam is, at the end of the show, he's valued because of the qualities that he had in him all along. Suddenly the world's caught up with him.
Before we go, there are 2 questions that came up on Twitter that I feel I should ask you.
Okay.
The first is, do you even know how hot you are?
In terms of attractiveness, do you mean?
Well, it's not my question, but I think they mean attractiveness, yes.
Okay, let's just take it that they mean attractiveness, right? There's no answer I can give here that's going to make me sound good. Because, okay, ask me the question twice.
Deal.
Go on.
Do you even know how hot you are?
Yes, I know how hot I am. Okay, go again.
Do you even know how hot you are?
No, I don't even know how hot I am. I'll tell you what my trouble is. I don't even know how hot I am. See what I mean? Neither of those answers are any good. Unless I had a caveat, which is, do you know how hot you are? Yes, I do know how hot I am. Not very. That's the only way I can try and get out of it. So I'm going to say thank you very much for your compliment, whoever you are. But no, see, I just don't know how to answer. Just thank you very much for your compliment, I imagine. But I'm going to back out of it at this stage.
This one might have a more concrete answer.
Okay.
What does Kit Harington smell like?
It depends at what point you catch him, really. I mean, I think I've been with Kit at many stages of his own tiredness and his own fatigue and his own, his own sense of progression through a day. If you catch him at the right moment, you've never smelled anything as nice in your life. Catch him at the wrong moment, and believe me, you won't be smelling much else for quite a while after. I think people, that's an interesting point, actually, about people think, Game of Thrones, it must be such a kind of glamorous shoot and you must have such a fun time on it. The fact of the matter is that we're up to our knees in mud a lot of the time, in the rain in Belfast, wearing leather costumes that we've worn for 10 years. We just stink. We stink so much. We absorb all sorts of smells into that costume. There's always fires burning. There's always horses who are always dropping their load all over the place. I think I've smelt as bad on Game of Thrones as I've ever smelt in my life and hope to smell for the rest of my life. So what does Kit Harington smell like? The thing is, I don't know if he's got any... I should know this. He's such a good friend of mine. I don't know if he's got any kind of aftershave endorsements going at the moment. I wish I knew, because then I could say that. I don't want to say he smells like a certain aftershave that he's contractually forbidden from wearing. So I'm going to play it safe, nice down the line. I'm going to say good a lot of the time, really not good some of the time.
Well, John, I am so grateful that you took all this time to be on Bullseye and talk with me. It was really nice to get to talk to you. And again, congratulations on this remarkable achievement.
Oh, thank you so much. No, I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
John Bradley. All of Game of Thrones is streaming right now on HBO Now and HBO Go. We've come to the end of another episode of Bullseye. Our show is recorded at MaximumFun.org World Headquarters overlooking MacArthur Park in beautiful Los Angeles, California. The lake in MacArthur Park has turned green. We don't know enough about science to know why that is, so we're going to say someone dumped a bunch of food coloring into it. The show is produced by Speaking Into Microphones. If you know why the lake is green, please don't tell us. It's more fun this way. Our producer is Kevin Ferguson. Jesus Ambrosio is our associate producer. We had help from Casey O'Brien. Our production fellow is Jordan Cowling. Our interstitial music is by DJ W, a.k.a. Dan Wally. He sent us some new music recently. Thank you, Dan. You're the best. You rule. You can find a sort of greatest hits of beats that he's made for Bullseye on Bandcamp, and it's pay what you will, so you can go download it for free if you want to feel like you're hosting your own little Bullseye inside your car. Our theme song is called Huddle Formation. It's by the great band The Go Team. Our thanks to them and their label Memphis Industries for letting us use that. And before you go, there are decades of Bullseye available to you to listen to. You can just pick a name of someone that you think should have been on Bullseye and type it into your search engine with the word Bullseye, and I bet it will come up. But also, you can find a big archive on YouTube, including all of the interviews you heard on this week's program. Just search for Bullseye with Jesse Thorn. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. We're on Twitter at Bullseye. And I guess that's about it. Just remember, all great radio hosts have a signature sign-off.
Bullseye with Jesse Thorn is a production of MaximumFun.org and is distributed by NPR.